In this lesson, we're going to look at how we make a player jump. And we're going to keep things really simple, so no fancy graphics, just plain old simple default settings in Godot. So all right, so the first thing I want to do is to create a 2D scene. I'm going to rename this scene as world. And in my world scene, obviously I need a player. So I'm going to click on plus, and I'm going to go for a kinematic body 2D and create. In my kinematic body 2D, I will need a sprite and create. And we'll also need, so again in kinematic body 2D, we're going to do a collision shape 2D. That way we can detect when it's hit the ground. With this kinematic body 2D, let's just rename that as player. And with the sprite, let's just drag in the default icon here from Godot. We'll drag that and drop that onto the texture. And there's our little player here. Now with the collision shape 2D, let's go across to the shape and select that as a rectangle. And we'll just zoom in here so we can see what's going on. There's a little collision shape here. Let's just make that a little bit bigger. And we'll just cover the extent of the player. Now, the last thing I'm going to do is to group all this together using this little icon here, and then we can move everything around the screen. I'll just zoom out a little bit more and center everything. There we go. All right, so what I want next is I want a ground plane down here. So in my world scene, I'm going to click on plus, and I'm going to select a static body 2D. I'm then going to click on plus again. I'm going to add in a color rectangle. Don't need any fancy graphics here. Let's just increase the size of that. Maybe just change the color to something a little bit more appropriate. There's a green color. Now with the static body 2D, let's rename this as ground. And let's add in a collision shape 2D. With the collision shape 2D, obviously we need to set that. We'll set that as a rectangle. Now we can see it there. Let's just increase the size of that. Let's drag it across. We don't need to be perfect here. We're just going for a very quick demo here, and let's just do that. Okay, with the ground selected again, I'm going to group everything together and just drag that down to the bottom of the screen there. And that should suffice for what we require in terms of graphics and some default player. Now with my player selected, I'm going to add a new script and create. And we'll get rid of this default in here, this default content. Let's remove that. Okay, what do we need? Well, we need to set the power of gravity. So that's going to be a constant, and we'll call this gravity, and we'll set that equal to 10. The other thing I'll need, another constant here, is the jump power. So the jump power, let's set that equal to negative, let's say 300. Now it's negative for a reason. In the game world, the negative direction is up and the positive direction is down. If you watched any of my other videos, you would have seen that. So we've got the jump power set. The other thing we need is the velocity of the player. So this is going to be a variable. We'll call this one velocity. It's going to be equal to something called a vector 2. So vector 2, which means it takes an X and a Y direction. Now you might see this done different ways. You might see a 0, 0 in here. In other words, X and Y are both 0. And we can leave it blank like this. And we can also put dot 0 like that. All right, so that's setting the velocity to a vector 2, which is just set to 0. Okay, next thing I want to do is to define the physics function. So this is all about a physics process. We're moving a body, so physics is involved. And we have this inbuilt function here called physics process delta. All right, well, what do I want to do here? Well, the first thing I want to do is to check if the jump key is being pressed. So if input, so if there's an input, dot, and then is action just pressed? So have I just pressed the jump key? And we've got some defaults here. I'm going to go for UI accept, which I believe is the spacebar or the enter key. So I'll click on that and a colon on the end there. So if we detect an input, and if it's a key that's just been pressed, and that key is the accept key, which should be enter or the spacebar, what do I want to do? Well, I want to change the velocity in the y direction. So velocity dot y, and we want to set that equal to the jump power. So jump power. The other thing I need to do, I'm going to do it just up here before that, is I need to have this player falling and constantly falling until it hits the ground. So how do we do that? Well, we just apply gravity to the velocity in the y direction. So the velocity in the y direction is going to be equal plus equals gravity. So in other words, what we're doing here, we are adding this gravity of 10 every loop through this physics process. So it's going to keep increasing. It's going to be 10, 20, 30, 40, etc. Then we're detecting if we hit the jump key. And if we do, we're going to set the velocity in the y direction. And we're going to have that as a negative 300. So we're subtracting 300 from that velocity in the y direction. Now, the next thing I need to do here is just invoke the movement. So that's a move and slide. And I need to pass in the velocity. Okay, so that should work very simply. So let's save that and we'll click on play and we'll select the current scene, yes. All right, so the player has fallen, it's hit the ground, and if I hit the space bar, you can see the player is jumping. Okay, just one or two little tweaks here. Let's just add in here, velocity equals. So every time this move and slide occurs, we do get an output number here, which we're setting as velocity. And the other thing we're not using is delta. It's actually built in here. We just put an underscore in here just to get rid of that little error down here, little warning triangle. And like click on play. And there we have our player is jumping. Now the other thing you might notice is I can keep pressing my space bar and the player will keep on jumping. Now I don't want that to happen. I just want it to jump when it's on the ground. So all we need to do is in this move and slide method here, we can actually pass in a second argument. And you can see here it says move and slide, and we can pass in the up direction, which is a vector 2. So all I need to do in here is just define vector 2 dot and up. So that is the up direction. Now that we have that, that gives us access to more methods, more built-in methods. And one of them is to test if we're on the floor. So in here, if the input is, if we just press the key and we're pressing the jump key and we are on the floor, and we do that by saying is on floor. So if we're on the floor and the jump key has been pressed, then we're going to set the velocity in the y direction equal to the jump power. Well, let's go ahead and try that. So here we have our player, it's fallen to the ground. We hit the space bar or the enter key. And if I press it more than once, I am not doing any double or triple jumps. So if you found that video useful, remember to give me a quick thumbs up and maybe even subscribe if you want to be notified when I release new videos. And in the description below, you will find a link to my full courses.